Now we talk about John Rawls and the ethics of egalitarianism, justice, and fairness. A 20th century American philosopher John Rawls from 1921 to 2002 advocated for a justice-centered moral philosophy. He argued that much of Western civilization's institutions and laws are based on some unassailable and universally agreed upon concept of justice. And John Rawls called this the original position. He argued that this original position is a starting point for humans who wish to establish a society, or at least the rules to create a social order of that prospective culture. So he contended that a group of humans set the task to create some kind of social order would do so from a standpoint in which justice was paramount. That drive would lead to rules and institutions that would ensure the well-being of those they govern, not to mention, and this is important, their own well-being. In other words, Rawls took a cue from the Declaration of Independence that all people are created equal. And this is a moral philosophical concept that manifests in a form of rules, just like Kant called egalitarianism. Equality, ideally, then leads to justice. And we have this liberty principle. When we talk about the liberty principle, while a strict reading of egalitarianism would mean equal rights, justice, and treatment for all humans no matter what, Rawls acknowledged that such a dream world is nice, but it is not likely to happen. He knew that inequalities happen, but that they could at least be minimized by two principles, both outgrowths of the original position. And this principle, which is the liberty principle, according to Rawls, states that the individual should have the right, in theory, to as many liberties as possible within the greater scope of a system that has a stated purpose of liberty for all. In other words, the individual has rights to live his life in as much as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others to live their lives and to seek their opportunities in much the same fashion. Then we have this difference principle. Rawls' other main principle, derived from the original position, is called the difference principle. Again, recognizing that inequalities and differences in wealth and standing are going to happen, Rawls found these disparities to be just fine so long as those with more fulfill their due moral diligence or obligation to make up for those differences and even out things, if only a little, by helping those who do not have the advantages that they have had. So acting on the difference principle is what Rawls called natural duties. Among these moral actions by which people must live their lives to maintain the moral equilibrium are not actively harming others, keeping promises, and helping those less fortunate than themselves. These ideals engender mutual respect and lead to an individual sense of justice in day-to-day life, as well as more formal political and legal systems to ensure that the basic needs of all humans are met. Rawls then asks us to consider how we would enjoy or fit into such a society in which we have no prior knowledge of our own standing. The philosopher himself argued that we'd end up with a society where the disadvantaged would get extra help. Rawls attests that the less fortunate would be given the same rights as all, and that the only limitation would occur when property rights were threatened. So this leads into Rawls' principle of equality of opportunity. He advocated that it is of ethical importance to provide for those who are least advantaged, especially due to biases regarding race, poverty, disabilities, and other inequalities in our real-world societies. Such provisions include intervention at the government level so as to ensure that decisions and policies are made with an openness to people from all walks of life. And also we have critiques on Kant or Kantianism. One of those is Schopenhauer's concerns. He was a major 19th century German philosopher, agreed with many of Kant's position on ethics but not how he arrived at some of his conclusions. For Schopenhauer argued that denying feelings like sympathy leads to an increased egoism, which clouds judgment. He suggested that sympathy is necessary in determining how to act in a moral way towards one's fellow man. And also, when it comes to Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, he was almost immediately out of the gate a critique of Kant's universal theories. Like Schopenhauer, Hegel had some problems with the formula of the universal law of nature. He was uncomfortable with how Kant, in his attempt to humanize morality, dehumanized morality. And Mill's critique on Kant, he argued that with a little picking, Kant's categorical imperative formulations reduced to a kind of utilitarianism. He thought moral duties took their cues from a consideration of how they would affect happiness, both of others as well as our own. This, of course, is a utilitarian principle. And Freud disagreed with Kant's idea that a moral sense of duty is innate. He held that those ideas came from the superego, which rewards good behavior. In this regard, being moral due to a sense of duty is a mental neurosis to please the psyche and not out of any kind of deeply held sense of duty or purpose. I hope you have learned a lot from our discussion about deontological ethics, especially on figures like Immanuel Kant and John Rawls.